2 or 3 days ago, was talking with my nephews and nieces, and great nephews and nieces, I hate to say the word, and they said, what are you doing? And I said, well, I've got to go to London and I'm doing this little talk. And my 11-year-old nephew said, well, what? He said, you don't bake cakes, you don't knit. He said, what are you going to talk about? And there's that awful moment. I said in a very small voice, I said, me, you see? And he did one of those wonderful 11-year-old reactions, which was like, oh, and turned away. But it did give me cause for reflection, because, you know, I really did, I thought about, what am I doing here? I'm delighted to be here. But, you know, there is that moment you think, okay, I have been acting now. It's been 40 years. It's quite extraordinary, but it's been 40 years. It's been 41 years, actually. There's a lot that we could talk about. But the truth of it is, and I know you're going to ask me some questions in a minute, which is great, and that'll be fun. But the truth of it is, I know that it comes down to Superman. Without Superman, would you have invited me? I mean, possibly, because you're a Falcon Crest man, I know.
I'd invite everyone, believe me.
Well,
you're welcome at my house.
Oh,
that they'd come.
But the point of it is that I think it's fair to say that for many, many years, come on in.
Sorry.
No, you're not. We started because we got fed up waiting for both of you. But the truth of it is, I have spent many years not embracing Ursa, if you know what I mean. I mean, for years and years and years, I'd say, well, doesn't look like me, you know, it's not me, and all anybody wants to talk about is Ursa and Superman, and it was very recently, and I mean very recently, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, that I was asked to do a talk about my career. And when I sat down to work out what the hell I was going to talk about, everything comes back to Superman.
As a young actress, so you're on Superman, you're filming it, they're completely over budget.
Yeah.
He gets sacked, and then 6 months later, you're back on set with a different director. How was that with a different director?
People are still very sensitive about this issue. Give it a toss, really. I really don't.
Heard it here first.
Well, no, because I wasn't involved in the politics of it. I really wasn't.
But I mean, just as an actress, like technique.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant to have 2 different directors. You know, we reshot a lot of stuff. You've got Richard Donner, who was Californian in every possible way, with his blue tinted glasses and his slightly long silvery hair, which I think is and very laid back. And his approach to stuff was very much, you know, it was very laid back. And so the other actors, it was lovely. He was very much for the actors, and that worked beautifully. However, Richard Lester, very English. Not a terrific sense of humour, which for somebody that has directed so many wonderful Beatles films and everything, I mean, brilliant guy, but not as warm, not as effusive as Donner. And I remember he said to me, there was a scene where I have to throw a manhole cover. It got to about 3 o'clock in the morning, and we're on the back lot of Pinewood. And they hadn't figured out that the back lot of Pinewood was on an underground lake, so it was freezing. You know, you're on the tarmac was freezing cold, and I, as you probably noticed, don't wear a great deal of this on. And so we come onto the set, and I've already had suffered greatly from my, you know what's coming, because it's my famous story, which I'm going to repeat because it's true. There was nothing you could do to warm me up. I had slits on the costume, and slits right the way, which showed my thighs. So there was no underneath warmth, but they could do a mink-lined bra. And indeed, they did. So I had the hottest breasts in the business at that time. Every other part of me was freezing. But I came onto the set, and Lester said to me, right, you've got to go up to there's a manhole cover. You hit the wood, you cut the wood, you catch the manhole cover, you throw the thing, you hit Superman, he goes up in the air, and I can remember thinking, go there. But he said it in that very, very, very English, matter-of-fact way, you will do it. And bugger me, I did it. And I can tell you right now that if it had been Richard Donner, he probably would have said, Sarah, hey, you know, it doesn't matter if you can this and if you can that and whatever else. It worked for me. Lester worked for me. He also used 3 cameras. He was very technical. So to be, I think probably, I don't know if there's many other, I don't even know if there are any other actresses that have worked on a film and shot it twice, and I've shot lots of scenes twice with 2 completely different directors. Brilliant, brilliant experience.
on the new film where, like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's CGI and it just pops along and it's green screen or whatever.
Uh,
Do you feel like, you know, it was, when I say real flying, in the sense of like Panto or Peter Pan on wires, do you feel liberties were taken with them? It was a lot harder to do. You really earned your money, if you know what I mean, than they do now, just standing at a screen and popped along to the next building.
Yeah. Firstly, Peter Pan it wasn't. Peter Pan had a harness that went from there to there, right? That's the nature of those harnesses on the stage. You know, they're enormous, bloody great things with wires everywhere else. They hadn't figured it out until I came on with my slits up the side and nowhere for a harness. There was nowhere. I had a tiny little, like a little garter belt, a little thing round my waist with 2 rings on the side, 1 ring there, 1 ring there. And then there were wires, and then I hung over, and all of the support, all of the, it's called the kipper position, every time I flew, it was me. Because if they let me hang, which they did, I would just hang over like a sack of potatoes. So all of that had to be me. And it was bloody uncomfortable and very, very, very difficult. They also hadn't figured it out, you know. I mean, there's lots of stories about the producers and I mean, we the first, I think, the stories are getting a bit blurred in my mind, admittedly, but I believe I'm right that it was 90 days before the first flying shot was accepted. Because we just, I mean, I remember we went up the first time, the 3 of us, and we were on the Bond set, which was out at Pinewood. Started at Shepton, we moved to Pinewood, and it was the biggest set in the world. And they said to me, I remember they said, well, you get on this windowsill, and then you jump off, and then you fly, and then you ride. I can remember, oh, okay, because in those days I loved all of that. What they hadn't worked out was that they've got 3 tracks in the sky, 3 railroads, if you like, to carry the 3 villains. But when you go around a corner, guess what? You swing like a bunch of conkers. So the first time we went round, we all got tied up. And there we all hung, tied up with our wires, until lunchtime, until a few days later they'd figured out and taken all the tracks down and done that. So there were lots of things like that. Marlon Brando was, and for those of you of a certain age, and there's only 1 or 2 of you in here, we're all in the same team, I see you all, okay? Brando was, I don't think there was anybody bigger or greater. Why wasn't he just the best? I mean, Brando was, to work with Marlon Brando was, he had an aura. And they talk about being a superstar. He had an aura, and he was a regular, wonderful guy. He was lovely, but he had an aura. Gene Hackman was a regular guy. Gene Hackman was wonderful and lovely, and I went out with him. But he didn't have that. And I remember one day with Brando, you would come back from, when you want to do the scene, and you've all got your chairs with the names on the back, and it was standard practice that the minute you've got up, somebody sits in your seat. But the minute you come from the set, everybody gets up, oh God, I'm in Sarah Douglas, I better get out of here, you know, if you're lucky enough. And in Brando's case, I watched him, which was lovely. He was doing a scene, he came off, and as he walked towards us, I saw him clock that somebody was obviously sitting in Marlon Brando's seat. And rather than walk up to that seat, he actually took himself over there and put an upturned paint can and sat down in the corner over there. I mean, he was a really great guy. He sat me down on his lap. I can remember it well because I was kind of used to, well, it was a wahey for me because I remember also, I thought, do I sit on top of that or do I sit below it? I can remember that. Do I sit on his knees or do I sit up here, which may be rather close? And he sat me down and I was absolutely rigid with fear. And he said, what? He said, why are you like this? And I was like, and he said, you know, it's just people around him. He expressed it to me. He said, people around are so nervous of me, you know. And we started to get to know each other. I had a wonderful time with him. And one day and for those that know the story, I apologise, but it's a wonderful story because I plucked up courage and I said to him, you know, that look you have, that intensity that you have, which is so magical. And he said, it's not I'm being intense. He said, I don't have my eyeglasses on. And he said, I can't read my idiot boards, which are over there, you see. Because he had a girl that did these enormous idiot boards with his words written on. And in my case, He had the words written. Now again, this is one of those stories that I've sort of, over the years, I've begun to wonder if I've made it up. But he had the words written and sort of stuck to my face. He never learnt his words. And indeed, at the end, I know that he had an earpiece in, he had the words relayed to him. But he said to me, he said, if you look at Missouri Breaks, he said, you'll see Jack Nicholson. He said, there's a fence, you see the words written on it. He said, oh, I never learned my lines. And he said, in Last Tango in Paris, there's a scene with Marie Schneider, he said, where I'm kissing her passionately down her body, and she's naked. And he said, I had all the words written down the right-hand side of her body. No!
Let's talk about Schwarzenegger. And you played an evil queen in that. We all love an evil queen.
We were able to enjoy Arnold at his fullest and his bestest, and a lot of fun was had by all. He's no longer the governor of California, so I can choose my words a little bit carefully. But living in California, I have to be...
Didn't they call him the Grobinator or something at one point?
I can't imagine why. He would certainly always, and to this day, whenever he embraces me, he always takes a good firm feel, and then will tell me that I will be working out, or you haven't been working out. So yes, possibly you might call.
Jolly good fun.
Oh yes, no, he's great. He was a lot of fun, and he's another one that stuck. His guys, his people that he's always had around him, he's remained close with them, and they're there. And of course, Grace is, that was on the first day on the set. Everybody knew it was going to be a disaster because she stuck her tongue out at me and I stuck my tongue out at her, and it was love. And she and I have remained as close friends as one could possibly be, which is wonderful.
The chap who works alongside you, Terence Stamp. Can you tell us more about Terence?
Who I can say nothing but wonderful things about. I have to tell you that I saw him at the BFI recently, and it was such an absolute pleasure to see him. And he was saying to me, because we were talking about big films, I had just seen the film, one word, that he just did last year with Vanessa Redgrave.
Songs for Maria.
It wasn't. Yes, you're right. It
Yes,
wasn't. It wasn't one. Yeah, and Songs for Marion. And he said to me, God, what a wonderful experience to be doing a small film, working with Redgrave, and having this marvelous time. He was, I have to tell you, every day for me was an absolute joy. And I remember a lovely day, which we were out of Chobham Common, and I think that I was blowing a helicopter out of the sky, and we got the whole thing. We were kiss. And we got our trailers and everything, and there was a big high wall, and it turned out it was some Arab sheikh had got this big compound next door with all the great big orchards. But we went over the wall, or I went over the wall. Terence sent me over the wall to get some apples. And he said, fill your boots. I can see him now hanging over the wall. He said, put them in your boots. Because I was like, where am I going to... So I had all my apples stuffed down my boots. And then the dogs came. He was gone, and I'm like trying to get over the wall. He's great. He's a really wonderful man. Thank you.